The blood seeped through Levi Quincy's shirt, staining the faded cotton a deep crimson as he slumped against the weathered trunk of an oak tree, his breathing ragged and his vision blurring at the edges. The year was 1878, and the unforgiving Arizona Territory had claimed yet another victim, or so it seemed. Levi had been riding for days, pushing his chestnut stallion through the rugged terrain after a confrontation with cattle rustlers had left him with a bullet lodged somewhere in his shoulder. The town of Paradise was supposed to be his salvation, but as consciousness slipped from him like water through cupped hands, he wondered if he'd ever see its promised streets. "Mister, oh my God, you're bleeding." The voice cut through his haze of pain, soft yet commanding. Levi forced his eyes open, squinting against the harsh sunlight. A woman stood before him, her silhouette haloed by the setting sun. As she knelt beside him, her features came into focus, honey blonde hair pulled back in a practical braid, bright green eyes wide with concern, and a determined set to her jaw. "I'm fine," he muttered, attempting to rise and failing miserably as pain lanced through his shoulder. "You most certainly are not." Her hands moved with surprising confidence, gently pushing aside his torn shirt to examine the wound. "This needs proper tending. Who's your doctor?" Levi let out a bitter laugh that ended in a grimace. "Don't have one. Don't have anyone." The woman paused, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that somehow cut through his pain. "Then I'll be your healer," she said simply. "Name's Levi Quincy," he managed, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Emma O'Sullivan," she replied, already tearing a strip from her petticoat. "And you're lucky I found you, Mr. Quincy. Very lucky indeed." Emma worked quickly, fashioning a temporary bandage with skilled hands. Levi watched her through half-closed eyes, wondering what a woman like her was doing alone on the outskirts of Paradise. She didn't look like the frontier women he was accustomed to seeing. There was a softness to her that spoke of Eastern upbringing, yet a hardness in her movements that suggested she'd known her share of troubles. "Can you stand?" she asked, her voice cutting through his thoughts. Levi gritted his teeth and nodded, though he wasn't entirely certain. With Emma's arm around his waist and his good arm draped across her shoulders, they somehow managed to get him to his feet. His horse, faithful beast that it was, had remained nearby, grazing on the sparse grass. "My wagon is just over the ridge," Emma explained, her breath coming in short bursts as she supported his weight. "We need to get you there before dark." The journey to Emma's wagon seemed to take hours, though it couldn't have been more than a quarter-mile. Each step sent waves of agony through Levi's body, and by the time they reached the small covered wagon, he was barely conscious. Emma somehow maneuvered him onto the back of the wagon, where a simple pallet bed awaited. The space was cramped but neat, with bundles of dried herbs hanging from the wooden supports and various jars and bottles carefully secured in wooden crates. "You're some kind of medicine woman?" Levi asked, his voice slurred with pain. "Something like that," Emma replied, already rummaging through her supplies. "My father was a doctor. I learned what I could from him." She worked methodically, first cutting away his blood-soaked shirt, then cleaning the wound with a solution that smelled strongly of alcohol and burned like hellfire when it touched his raw flesh. Levi bit down on a strip of leather she offered him, muffling his groans as she probed the wound with slender metal instruments. "The bullet's still in there," she said, her voice steady despite the grim situation. "I need to get it out before infection sets in." Levi nodded, already bracing himself for what was to come. "Do what you need to do." Emma prepared a concoction of herbs and whiskey, which she helped him drink. The bitter liquid burned going down, but soon a blessed numbness began to spread through his body. Not enough to eliminate the pain entirely, but enough to make it bearable. "This will help," she said, placing a cool cloth on his forehead. "But I won't lie to you, Mr. Quincy. This is going to hurt." Through the haze of pain and growing intoxication, Levi found himself captivated by the determined set of Emma's jaw, the gentle way her hands moved despite the gruesome task ahead of her. She was beautiful, he realized, in a way that had nothing to do with conventional beauty and everything to do with the fierce compassion in her eyes. "Call me Levi," he managed to say before the real pain began. What followed was a blur of agony and half-conscious murmurings. Emma worked steadily, her face a mask of concentration as she extracted the bullet from his shoulder and cleaned the wound thoroughly. By the time she finished stitching him up, night had fallen completely, and Levi had passed out from a combination of pain, blood loss, and whiskey. When he awoke, pale morning light was filtering through the canvas cover of the wagon. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was or how he'd gotten there. Then the pain in his shoulder brought it all rushing back: the rustlers, the desperate ride, and the green-eyed woman who had likely saved his life. "You're awake." Emma's voice came from the front of the wagon. She appeared a moment later, carrying a tin cup of something steaming. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of buffalo," Levi admitted, attempting to sit up and immediately regretting it. "Stay still," she admonished, kneeling beside him. "The wound is clean, but you've lost a lot of blood. It will take time to heal." She helped him drink the bitter herbal tea, which seemed to ease some of the pain. As the fog lifted from his mind, Levi studied her more carefully. In the daylight, he could see the freckles dusting her nose and cheeks, the slight curl to her honey blonde hair, and the shadows beneath her eyes that spoke of a night spent watching over him. "Why are you helping me?" he asked finally. "You don't know me from Adam." Emma's smile was small but genuine. "I couldn't very well leave you to bleed out by the roadside, could I? Besides, helping people is what I do." "Are you heading to paradise?" Levi asked, noting the way her wagon was positioned on the trail. "I am," she confirmed, checking his bandages with gentle fingers. "I have business there." "What kind of business brings a lady doctor to a dusty frontier town?" Emma's expression shuddered slightly. "I'm not a doctor, not officially, and my business is my own, Mr. Quincy." Levi recognized the wall when he saw it. He'd built enough of them himself over the years. "Fair enough. And I told you it's Levi." Over the next few days, as Emma nursed him back to strength, they established a cautious routine. She tended his wound, brought him food and medicinal teas, and in the evenings, when the desert air cooled, she would sit beside him and they would talk. He learned that she was 26, born and raised in Boston, and that her father had indeed been a respected physician. What she didn't explain was why she had left the comforts of Eastern civilization for the hardships of the frontier, or why she traveled alone, things that were virtually unheard of for a woman in 1878. For his part, Levi shared little of substance. He told her he was 32, that he'd been a cowboy since he was 16, and that he'd worked on ranches throughout the territory. He didn't mention the war, or the years spent drifting from one cattle drive to another, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. On the fourth morning, Levi woke to find Emma already up and moving about outside the wagon. His strength was returning, and the fiery pain in his shoulder had subsided to a dull throb. He managed to pull himself up and, with considerable effort, climbed down from the wagon. Emma was tending to a small fire where a pot of coffee brewed. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, catching the early morning sunlight in a way that made Levi's breath catch in his throat. "You shouldn't be up," she said when she spotted him, frowning in disapproval. "Been laid up too long already," he replied, carefully lowering himself to sit on a fallen log near the fire. "Figure we should reach paradise today." Emma handed him a cup of coffee, strong and black the way he liked it. "We could, but your wound will heal just as well on the move," he interrupted. "I appreciate everything you've done, Miss O'Sullivan, but I can't impose on you any longer." Something like hurt flashed across her face before she masked it with a brisk nod. "Of course, I understand." They broke camp in silence, with Levi insisting on helping despite Emma's protests. By mid-morning, they were on the trail again, Emma driving her wagon with Levi riding alongside on his horse. The motion aggravated his shoulder, but he set his jaw against the pain, determined not to show weakness. Paradise appeared on the horizon around noon, a dusty collection of wooden buildings strung along a wide main street, with the imposing brick structure of the county courthouse standing at one end like an afterthought of civilization. "Not much to look at," Emma commented as they approached. "Never is," Levi agreed. "But it's got what folks need: a general store, a saloon, a blacksmith, even has a hotel of sorts." Emma nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And a sheriff, last I heard. Man named Hollister. Why, you in some kind of trouble?" "No," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Just curious." They rode into town side by side, drawing curious glances from the townspeople. Paradise wasn't large, maybe 500 souls at most, and newcomers were always a source of interest, especially a woman traveling alone with an injured cowboy. Levi directed Emma to the boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Peterson, a stern but fair woman who kept the cleanest establishment in town. As Emma negotiated for a room, Levi stood awkwardly in the small parlor, aware of his disheveled appearance and the bloodstains still visible on his shirt. "Rooms at the top of the stairs, first door on the right," Emma informed him when she returned. "Mrs. Peterson says there's a bathhouse out back if you're interested." Levi shifted uncomfortably. "I wasn't planning on staying here." Emma's eyebrows rose. "Where were you planning on staying?" "The saloon. With that wound." "I've slept in worse places," he muttered. "Don't be ridiculous," she said firmly. "I've spent 4 days keeping you alive, Mr. Quincy. I'm not about to let you undo all my hard work by sleeping in some flea-infested saloon where your wound will surely fester." There was something about the determined set of her jaw that reminded Levi of his mother, long dead now, who'd had the same way of brooking no argument when she'd made up her mind. He found himself nodding before he'd even decided to agree. "Fine," he conceded. "But just until I'm healed enough to find work." Emma's smile was triumphant. "Excellent. Now let's get your things and I'll change your bandages once we're settled." The room at Mrs. Peterson's was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single chair by the window that overlooked the main street. Levi insisted that Emma take the bed while he would make do with a pallet on the floor, an arrangement she reluctantly accepted after considerable argument. After they had settled in, Emma went out to explore the town and inquire about work, leaving Levi to rest. Despite his protests that he was fine, exhaustion claimed him almost as soon as she left, and he fell into a deep sleep on the pallet she'd prepared. He woke to the sound of the door opening, twilight shadows filling the small room. Emma entered carrying a basket covered with a cloth, the scent of fresh bread wafting from beneath it. "You're awake," she said, setting the basket on the small table by the window. "I brought supper. And good news, I've secured a position at the general store. Mr. Finch was quite impressed when I mentioned my knowledge of medicinal herbs." Levi sat up carefully, wincing as his shoulder protested. "That was quick. Paradise may be small, but it seems they're in need of someone with healing knowledge. The nearest doctor is in Tucson, 2 days' ride away." She began unpacking the basket, revealing bread, cheese, and some kind of stew in a covered container. "Mr. Finch says his wife has been plagued with headaches. When I suggested a remedy, He offered me work on the spot. They ate together as darkness fell, the single oil lamp casting long shadows across the room. Emma spoke enthusiastically about her plans to establish herself in paradise, perhaps eventually opening a proper apothecary. Levi listened, struck by her determination and the animated way she spoke of her dreams. "What about you?" she asked eventually. "What brought you to paradise?" Levi hesitated, poking at the remnants of stew with his spoon. "Work, mostly. Heard the Diamond G Ranch was hiring experienced hands. And the men who shot you, who were they?" His expression hardened. "Rustlers. Caught them with Diamond G cattle. They didn't take kindly to being interrupted." Emma's eyes narrowed. "You confronted cattle rustlers alone. That seems reckless." "Wasn't planning on confronting anyone," Levi said defensively. "Was just scouting the area when I stumbled across them. Didn't have much choice after that. And now, will you still seek work at this Diamond G?" Levi nodded. "Soon as I'm able. A man's got to eat." Emma studied him for a long moment, her green eyes searching his face as if looking for something beyond his words. Whatever she was seeking, she didn't comment on it, instead rising to clear away their meal. "Let me check your wound before we turn in," she said, her voice shifting to the professional tone she used when tending to him. Levi obediently removed his shirt, gritting his teeth against the discomfort. Emma's fingers were cool against his skin as she carefully peeled back the bandage. Her face was close to his as she examined the wound, close enough that he could count the freckles across her nose, could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "It's healing well," she pronounced, applying a fresh poultice of herbs before rebandaging the wound. "No signs of infection. You're lucky, Mr. Quincy." "Levi," he corrected automatically, suddenly aware of how intimate the small room felt, with just the two of them illuminated by the soft glow of the lamp. "And luck had nothing to do with it. It was your skill that saved me." A faint blush colored her cheeks at the compliment. "Well, you're not saved yet. You need rest and time to heal completely." Over the next week, they fell into a routine. Emma worked at the general store during the day while Levi gradually regained his strength. He took to helping Mrs. Peterson with small repairs around the boarding house, despite the older woman's protests that he should be resting. In the evenings, Emma would return with food and news from around town. They would eat together, and sometimes, when the night was mild, they would sit on the small porch of the boarding house, watching the stars emerge over the desert landscape. It was during one of these evenings that Emma finally opened up about why she had come to paradise. "My father died last year," she said quietly, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "Influenza. He was caring for patients until the very end, even when he himself was sick." Levi remained silent, sensing there was more to the story. "After he died, his partner, another doctor, made it clear that he had no use for me in the practice, despite my years of assisting my father." Her voice held a bitterness that seemed out of place with her usual gentle demeanor. "He said no one would want to be treated by a woman, that it was unnatural for a woman to practice medicine." "That's ridiculous," Levi said, surprising himself with the vehemence in his voice. "I've seen what you can do. You saved my life." Emma gave him a small, grateful smile. "Yes, well, doctor." Harrison didn't see it that way, and neither did most of Boston society. When my father's will was read, it turned out he'd left significant debts. The house had to be sold, and suddenly I found myself with nowhere to go and no means of supporting myself. "So you came west?" She nodded. "I'd heard stories about the frontier, how there was a shortage of medical professionals. I thought perhaps here, where necessity often outweighs propriety, my skills might be valued. And your family, no one objected to you traveling alone." "There's no one left to object," she said simply. "My mother died when I was 12. No siblings. A few distant cousins who made it clear they had no room for a spinster niece with unconventional ideas." Levi felt a surge of protectiveness, coupled with admiration for her courage. "Well, from what I've seen, paradise needs someone like you. Folks out here are practical. If you can heal them, they won't much care whether you're wearing trousers or skirts." Emma laughed, a bright sound in the quiet evening. "I hope you're right, Mr. Levi." She corrected herself with a smile that made his heart beat a little faster. As the days passed, Levi found himself increasingly drawn to Emma. It wasn't just her beauty, though he certainly appreciated the way her eyes lit up when she smiled, or how the sun brought out gold highlights in her honey blonde hair. It was her determination, her intelligence, and the compassion that seemed to radiate from her every action. By the second week, Levi's wound had healed enough that he could move his arm without significant pain. It was time to seek work at the Diamond G as he'd planned. Yet each morning, he found a reason to delay one more repair for Mrs. Peterson, an offer to help Emma carry supplies to the general store, a need to rest his shoulder just one more day. The truth, which he was reluctant to admit even to himself, was that he was in no hurry to leave Emma's company. For the first time in years, he felt a connection to another person, a sense of belonging that had eluded him since the war. Emma, too, seemed to enjoy his companionship. Her smile came more readily when he was around, and she'd taken to saving interesting stories from her day at the store to share with him over supper. Sometimes their hands would brush as they passed dishes, and Levi couldn't help but notice the way she would blush and look away. It was Mrs. Peterson who finally forced the issue, cornering Levi one morning as he fixed a loose step on the back porch. "That girl's sweet on you," the older woman said without preamble, her hands on her hips. Levi nearly dropped the hammer he was holding. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mrs. Peterson snorted. "Course you do, and you're sweet on her too, judging by the way you watch her when she's not looking." "It's not like that," Levi protested, though his ears burned at the accuracy of her observation. "It's exactly like that," Mrs. Peterson countered. "Question is, what are you going to do about it? You can't keep pretending you're too injured to seek work, and she deserves better than a man who can't be honest about his feelings." The older woman's words stung because they contained more than a grain of truth. Levi had been avoiding the inevitable, living in a pleasant bubble that couldn't last. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Levi finally broached the subject. "I'll be heading out to the Diamond G tomorrow," he said, keeping his eyes on the horizon. Shoulders healed enough for ranch work. He felt rather than saw Emma stiffen beside him. "I see," she said after a moment, her voice carefully neutral. That's good news. I'm glad you've recovered." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, filled with all the things neither of them seemed able to say. "Emma," Levi began, finally turning to look at her, only to be interrupted by shouts from the main street. They both stood, moving to the edge of the porch to see what was happening. A group of riders had entered town, their horses kicking up dust as they thundered down the main street. Even from a distance, Levi could see they were heavily armed, their expressions grim beneath the brims of their hats. "Those men," Emma said, her voice suddenly tense. "They look like trouble," Levi finished grimly, instinctively placing himself slightly in front of her as the riders drew nearer. The men, 5 of them, reined in their horses in front of the saloon across the street. They dismounted with the easy confidence of men accustomed to intimidating others. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with a bushy black beard, scanned the street with narrowed eyes. His gaze landed on the porch where Levi and Emma stood, and for a moment He seemed to freeze. Then a slow, menacing smile spread across his face. "Well, well," he called out, his voice carrying easily in the quiet evening. "If it ain't the cowboy who stuck his nose where it don't belong." Levi felt a cold weight settle in his stomach as he recognized the man, one of the rustlers he'd encountered before being shot. "Friends of yours?" Emma asked softly, her hand finding his arm. "Not exactly," Levi murmured. "Stay here." But Emma's fingers tightened on his arm. "No. If those are the men who shot you, exactly why you should stay back," Levi insisted, gently but firmly removing her hand. "I need to speak with Sheriff Hollister." Before Emma could protest further, the bearded man was crossing the street, his hand resting casually on the butt of his revolver. His companions remained by the saloon, watching with predatory interest. "Didn't expect to see you alive, cowboy," the man said as he approached, his voice a lazy drawl that didn't match the dangerous glint in his eyes. "Must be my lucky day." Levi stepped fully in front of Emma, his own hand hovering near his hip where his gun would normally be, except he wasn't wearing it, having left it in their room at the boarding house. "This is a peaceful town," Levi said, keeping his voice steady. "Whatever business you think you have with me, it can wait." The man laughed, an ugly sound. "Ain't no business, just finishing what we started." His eyes shifted to Emma, visible behind Levi's shoulder. "Unless you're too busy with your lady friend." Levi felt a surge of anger at the leering way the man looked at Emma. "Leave her out of this, Johnston." The use of his name seemed to surprise the rustler. "You remember me. I'm flattered." "Hard to forget the face of a man who shoots you in the back," Levi replied coldly. Johnston's eyes narrowed. "You were trespassing, and sticking your nose in business that wasn't yours. Stealing cattle is everyone's business in cattle country." The confrontation might have escalated further if not for the timely arrival of Sheriff Hollister, a tall, lean man with iron gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. He approached with measured steps, his badge gleaming in the fading light. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his hand resting casually on his holstered revolver. Johnston took a step back, his demeanor shifting subtly. "Just greeting an old friend, Sheriff. No harm in that." Hollister's gaze moved from Johnston to Levi and Emma, his expression revealing nothing. "Mr. Quincy, Miss O'Sullivan." "Any problem here?" Emma stepped forward before Levi could answer. "This man and his companions appear to be threatening Mr. Quincy, Sheriff. I believe they may be the same men who shot him 2 weeks ago near the Eastern Trail." Johnston's face darkened at her words. "That's a serious accusation, madam. You got any proof of that?" "Only Mr. Quincy's word," she replied evenly, "and the bullet I removed from his shoulder." Hollister's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's so." He turned to Levi. "You making an official complaint, Quincy?" Levi hesitated. "Without witnesses, it would be his word against Johnston's and his gang. And if he filed a complaint and Hollister couldn't make it stick, Johnston would surely seek revenge, possibly putting Emma in danger." "Not at this time, Sheriff," he said finally. "But I'd appreciate it if you'd keep an eye on our visitors. Make sure they behave themselves while they're in paradise." Hollister nodded, seeming to understand the unspoken concerns. "I'll do that." He turned to Johnston. "You and your boys planning to stay long?" Johnston's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just passing through. Thought we'd enjoy the hospitality of your fine establishment across the way for a night or two." "See, that's all you do," Hollister said mildly, but there was steel beneath his words. "Paradise is a peaceful town. I aim to keep it that way." With a mock salute, Johnston backed away, rejoining his companions at the saloon. But the look he shot Levi as he left made it clear that the matter was far from settled. As darkness fell completely, Hollister turned to Levi and Emma. "You two should get inside. And Quincy, I'd suggest you wear your sidearm until Johnston and his boys move on." After the sheriff departed, Emma rounded on Levi, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and anger. "You're not still planning to ride out to the Diamond G tomorrow, are you? Not with those men in town?" "I can't hide forever, Emma," Levi said, though the prospect of leaving her alone in town with Johnston and his gang nearby made his blood run cold. "It's not hiding to be sensible," she argued. "Those men clearly want to harm you. Going off alone would be foolish." They continued the debate inside their room, voices kept low to avoid disturbing the other boarders. Emma's concern was palpable, and Levi found himself torn between the need to seek work and the desire to ensure her safety. "Come with me," he said suddenly, the words escaping before he'd fully formed the thought. Emma blinked in surprise. "What? To the Diamond G," Levi clarified. "Come with me tomorrow. The ranch owner's wife has been ailing for months, according to what I've heard. Your skills would be welcome there. But my position at the store, Mr. Finch would understand, and you'd be safer away from town until Johnston and his men move on." Emma considered this, her practical nature weighing the proposal. "You think the ranch would have use for my services?" "I'm certain of it," Levi assured her, "and we could return to Paradise once the danger has passed." The plan was settled by morning. Emma spoke with Mr. Finch, who was disappointed but understanding, especially when she explained about Johnston and his apparent vendetta against Levi. They packed their meager belongings, Levi now wearing his revolver openly on his hip, and set out for the Diamond G as the sun climbed into a cloudless sky. Emma drove her wagon while Levi rode alongside, both of them alert for any sign of trouble. But the trail remained peaceful, with only the occasional jackrabbit or desert quail disturbing the stillness. As they traveled, Levi found himself watching Emma more than the surrounding landscape. The sun brought out golden highlights in her hair, and the determination in her profile as she handled the wagon with practiced ease stirred something deep within him. He'd spent years drifting, never allowing himself to form attachments, convinced that a man with his past had no right to happiness. But Emma had upended all his carefully constructed defenses with her gentle hands and fierce spirit. "You're staring," Emma observed without looking at him, though a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Levi cleared his throat, embarrassed at being caught. "Just making sure you're handling the trail all right. I've been driving this wagon across rougher terrain than this for months," she reminded him. "I think I can manage." "Never doubted it," he replied, earning a quick, bright smile that made his heart skip a beat. They reached the Diamond G by mid-afternoon, the sprawling ranch house visible long before they arrived at the main gate. Cattle dotted the rolling grasslands, and cowboys on horseback moved among the herds with practiced efficiency. The ranch owner, George Daniels, met them in the yard, his weathered face curious but not unwelcoming. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work. "Mr. Daniels," Levi began, dismounting carefully to spare his still healing shoulder. "I'm Levi Quincy. I heard you might be looking for experienced hands." Daniels nodded, his sharp eyes taking in Levi's careful movements. "Might be. You look like you've seen some trouble recently." "Ran into some rustlers a couple weeks back," Levi admitted. "Got shot for my trouble. Miss O'Sullivan here saved my life." Daniels turned his attention to Emma, who had climbed down from her wagon. "That's so. I have some medical training," Emma explained modestly. "Mr. Quincy mentioned that your wife has been unwell. I thought perhaps I might be of assistance while he works for you." A flicker of interest and hope crossed Daniel's face. "Margaret's been poorly for months. Doctor from Tucson couldn't figure out what's ailing her." He studied Emma more carefully. "You a nurse?" My father was a physician in Boston, Emma replied. I assisted him for many years and continued his work after his passing, though not officially, of course. Daniels considered this, then nodded decisively. Reckon we could use both of you. Quincy, once that shoulder's fully healed, you can work with the herd. Until then, there's plenty of repairs needed around the place. He turned to Emma. As for you, Miss O'Sullivan, I'd be grateful if you'd take a look at Margaret. Can't promise anything, but she's desperate for relief. They were shown to separate quarters, Emma to a small guest room in the main house, Levi to the bunkhouse where the ranch hands slept. Before they parted, Levi pulled Emma aside. Stay alert, he warned quietly. I don't think Johnston would follow us out here, but… I'll be careful, she promised, her hand briefly squeezing his. You do the same. The next few weeks established a new rhythm to their lives. Levi worked alongside the other ranch hands, his shoulder gradually regaining full strength. He found he enjoyed the routine of ranch life, the early mornings, the physical labor, the camaraderie among the men. Emma, meanwhile, had become indispensable to the household. Her treatment had already begun to improve Margaret Daniels' condition, which turned out to be a combination of chronic migraines and a lingering respiratory ailment. The ranch owner's wife, a gentle woman in her 40s with prematurely gray hair, grew increasingly fond of Emma, often remarking that it was like having the daughter she'd never been blessed with. Levi and Emma saw each other daily, usually at mealtimes when all the ranch workers gathered in the main house to eat at the long table in the dining room. Sometimes in the evenings, they would find a moment to walk together, sharing the events of their day and carefully avoiding any mention of their inevitable return to paradise. For Levi had begun to think of the Diamond G as more than a temporary refuge. The work suited him, Daniels was fair, and most importantly, Emma seemed content. He'd caught himself imagining a future here, perhaps a small cabin of their own on the ranch property, Emma establishing a proper practice, children with her green eyes and determined spirit. Such thoughts both thrilled and terrified him. He had no right to dream of such things, no right to imagine Emma tied to a man with his past. Yet each time she smiled at him, each time their hands brushed in passing, the hope within him grew stronger. One evening, about a month after their arrival at the Diamond G, Levi was returning from the far pasture when he noticed a rider approaching the ranch at speed. Something about the urgency in the rider's posture set off alarms in Levi's mind, and he changed direction to intercept the newcomer. As he drew closer, he recognized one of the young cowboys from town, a freckle-faced kid who worked at the livery stable. The boy reined in his lathered horse when he spotted Levi. "Mr. Quincy," he called, his voice cracking with excitement. "Sheriff Hollister sent me to find you." Levi's stomach tightened with apprehension. "What's happened, Billy?" The boy caught his breath, his face flushed from the hard ride. "It's them rustlers, Johnston and his gang. Sheriff caught him red-handed with Diamond G cattle 2 days ago. There was a shootout." "Hollister, is he all right?" Billy nodded. "He is, but one of Johnston's men got killed. The rest, including Johnston, they got away. Sheriff thinks they might come looking for revenge, maybe head this way. He wanted to warn Mr. Daniels and you since Johnston seemed to have a particular grudge against you." Levi's mind raced. If Johnston was on the run and looking for revenge, the Diamond G would be an obvious target, especially with Levi and Emma there. "Ride on to the main house," he instructed Billy. "Tell Mr. Daniels what you've told me. I'll gather the men from the south pasture." As Billy galloped toward the ranch house, Levi wheeled his horse and rode hard for the pasture where several of the hands were working. They needed to prepare for potential trouble, and quickly. By nightfall, the Diamond G was on alert. Daniels had stationed men at strategic points around the property. The women were secured in the main house, and extra ammunition had been distributed. Levi found himself positioned near the main gate with two other cowboys, watching the darkening trail for any sign of approaching riders. His thoughts kept turning to Emma, safely inside the house but undoubtedly worried. He'd barely had time to speak with her before taking up his position, only enough to warn her to stay inside and keep away from the windows. The night wore on without incident, the silence broken only by the occasional call of a night bird or the distant lowing of cattle. Levi's eyes strained against the darkness, every shadow seeming to move, every sound potentially signaling danger. It was nearing midnight when one of the other cowboys nudged him, pointing toward a distant ridge where a faint light had appeared, then vanished. "Signal lantern," the man whispered. "Someone's out there." Levi nodded grimly. "Wake Mr. Daniels. Tell him they're coming." As the cowboy slipped away, Levi continued watching the ridge. The light flashed again, then twice more in rapid succession. They were coordinating their approach. Within minutes, Daniels joined him at the gate, a Winchester rifle cradled in his arms. "How many, you think?" "Can't be sure," Levi replied. "Johnston had 4 men with him in town, but one's dead, according to Billy. Could be just the 4 of them, or they might have recruited others." Daniel's expression was grim in the moonlight. "My men are ready. If they want to fight, they'll get one." The attack, when it came, was from multiple directions at once. Riders burst from the shadows, guns blazing as they charged toward the ranch buildings. Levi and Daniels returned fire from their position, forcing the attackers to veer away from the main gate. Gunfire erupted around the perimeter as the ranch hands engaged the intruders. In the chaos, Levi lost track of how many attackers there were. It could have been 5 or 15, impossible to tell in the darkness and confusion. A bullet splintered the fence post inches from Levi's head, and he ducked lower, returning fire at the shadowy figure who'd shot at him. He heard a cry of pain, then the sound of a horse galloping away. The firefight continued for what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes. Gradually, the gunshots became more sporadic as the attackers retreated into the darkness. "They're pulling back," Daniels said, reloading his rifle. "But they'll be back. That was just a probing attack, testing our defenses." Levi nodded, his thoughts immediately turning to Emma. "I need to check on the house." They moved cautiously through the ranch yard, alert for any remaining attackers. The main house appeared undamaged, its windows dark. As they approached, the front door opened a crack, and a woman's voice called out softly, "George, is that you?" "It's me, Margaret," Daniels replied, hurrying forward. "Are you all right?" Levi followed him into the house, his eyes scanning for Emma. He found her in the parlor, tending to one of the ranch hands who'd been wounded in the attack. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she bandaged the man's arm, her face composed despite the danger. She looked up as Levi entered, relief flooding her features. "You're not hurt." "I'm fine," he assured her, moving to her side. "How bad is it?" he asked, nodding toward the injured cowboy. "Just a graze," Emma replied. "He was lucky." The wounded man grimaced. "Don't feel particularly lucky, madam." Daniels joined them, his expression grave. "They'll be back, probably at first light. We need to get the women to safety." "There's a root cellar beneath the kitchen," Margaret suggested. "It's well hidden and solidly built." Daniels shook his head. "Too dangerous. If they overrun the house, you'd be trapped." He turned to Levi. "The box canyon to the north, we could move the women and children there before dawn, leave a couple of men to guard them." Levi considered this. The canyon Daniels mentioned was about 2 miles from the ranch house, accessible by a narrow, easily defended entrance but offering multiple escape routes through the hills beyond. It was a good choice for a temporary refuge. "I'll take them," he volunteered, already thinking through the logistics. Emma straightened, her green eyes flashing. "I'm not hiding in a canyon while men fight and possibly die. My skills are needed here." "Emma," Levi began, but she cut him off. "I've treated gunshot wounds before, Levi. If there's going to be fighting, you'll need someone who knows how to tend the wounded." Daniels looked between them, then nodded reluctantly. "She's right, Quincy. We might need her skills before this is over." He turned to his wife. "But you, Margaret, and the cook's children will go to the canyon with 2 of the men." Preparations were made quickly. By 3 in the morning, Margaret Daniels and the others were safely escorted to the canyon, while the remaining ranch hands fortified their positions around the property. Emma prepared a makeshift infirmary in the dining room, laying out her medical supplies with the same methodical care she'd shown when treating Levi's wound. As dawn approached, Levi found her there, double-checking her preparations. He watched her from the doorway for a moment, struck by the calm determination in her movements. "You should get some rest," he said finally, "while you can." Emma looked up, a stray lock of honey blonde hair falling across her forehead. "I could say the same to you." Levi moved into the room, stopping beside her. "Emma, if anything happens, don't," she interrupted, her voice suddenly fierce. "Don't say goodbye, Levi Quincy. This isn't the end of anything." The conviction in her voice stirred something in him, hope, perhaps, or courage. Without thinking, he reached out, brushing the lock of hair from her face. His hand lingered, cupping her cheek. "When this is over," he said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you." Emma's eyes searched his, a question in their green depths. "Why not tell me now?" Levi hesitated, words failing him as they so often did when it mattered most. Instead of speaking, he leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle touch of lips that conveyed what he couldn't say aloud. For a heartbeat, Emma seemed frozen in surprise. Then her arms slid around his neck, and she was kissing him back with a fervor that matched the storm of emotions in his own heart. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Levi rested his forehead against hers. "That's why," he murmured. "Because once I started, I might not stop." A soft smile curved Emma's lips, her eyes luminous in the lamplight. "I think I can live with that." The moment was shattered by the sound of a warning shot from outside, followed by shouts of alarm. Levi pulled away reluctantly, his hand automatically going to his gun. "Stay inside," he ordered, already moving toward the door. "And keep away from the windows." The next hours passed in a blur of gunfire and smoke. Johnston and his men, who numbered at least a dozen, more than Levi had expected, attacked at first light, driving hard for the main house. The ranch hands fought back fiercely, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. Levi found himself in the thick of the fighting, moving from position to position as needed, his revolver hot in his hand. He glimpsed Johnston once, the man's bearded face contorted with rage as he fired from behind an overturned wagon. The tide began to turn when one of the ranch hands managed to circle behind the attackers, catching them in a crossfire. 3 of Johnston's men fell in quick succession, and the rest began to waver, their coordinated attack dissolving into individual efforts to seek cover. Johnston himself seemed to realize the battle was lost. Levi saw him mount his horse and gallop toward the main house, not retreating, but making one final, desperate push. With a cold certainty, Levi knew Johnston was heading for the house for Emma. He sprinted across the open yard, heedless of the bullets kicking up dust around him. He had to reach the house before Johnston did. He burst through the back door just as Johnston kicked in the front, the 2 men coming face to face in the main hallway. Johnston's gun was already raised, but Levi fired first, his bullet catching the rustler in the chest. Johnston staggered but didn't fall. His gun swung toward Levi, finger tightening on the trigger. The shot that rang out came not from Johnston's gun, but from behind Levi. Johnston's eyes widened in surprise, then he crumpled to the floor, revealing Emma standing in the dining room doorway, a small derringer smoking in her hand. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Levi was at her side, gently taking the gun from her trembling fingers. "Are you all right?" he asked urgently, checking her for injuries. Emma nodded, her face pale but composed. "I'm fine. I heard him breaking in and I couldn't let him hurt you." Outside, the gunfire was dying down as Johnston's remaining men scattered, their leader fallen. Daniels and his men were already in pursuit, determined to ensure none escaped to threaten the ranch again. In the aftermath, as the wounded were tended and the dead laid out for burial, Levi found himself unable to leave Emma's side. She worked tirelessly, treating injuries with steady hands that betrayed no sign of her earlier shock. It was late afternoon before they finally had a moment alone, sitting on the porch of the main house as the setting sun painted the landscape in hues of gold and crimson. "You were going to tell me something," Emma reminded him softly. "Before the attack." Levi took a deep breath, gathering courage. He'd faced rustlers and outlaws, fought in a war and survived countless dangers, yet nothing had ever terrified him as much as the prospect of laying his heart bare. "I've been drifting most of my life," he began, his eyes on the distant mountains. "After the war, I couldn't seem to settle anywhere, took work where I could find it, never stayed long, told myself it was because I liked the freedom, but the truth is I was running." "From what?" Emma asked gently. "From myself, I suppose. From the things I did during the war, the man I became." He paused, the old guilt threatening to silence him. "I was a scout for the Union Army, did things I'm not proud of, things that haunt me still." Emma's hand found his, her touch warm and reassuring. "The war changed many men, Levi. What matters is who you are now." Levi turned to look at her, finding no judgment in her green eyes, only understanding and something deeper that made his heart race. "When I met you," he continued, "when you saved my life, something changed. For the first time in years, I found myself wanting to stay somewhere, wanting a future. And now," Emma's voice was barely above a whisper, "now I know what I want," Levi said, his voice gaining strength with each word. "I want a life here at the Diamond G. Daniels has offered me the foreman position starting next month." Emma's eyes widened in surprise. "That's wonderful, Levi." "There's more," he said, turning fully to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I want that life with you, Emma. I know we haven't known each other long, and I have little to offer except my heart and my promise to spend every day trying to deserve you." But Emma pressed her fingers gently to his lips, stopping his words. "You don't need to convince me, Levi Quincy. My heart made its decision the day I found you bleeding by the roadside." "Is that a yes?" Levi asked, hardly daring to believe. Emma's smile was radiant. "That's a yes." Their kiss was gentle at first, then deepening with the promise of the future they would build together. When they finally pulled apart, the last rays of sunlight gilded Emma's hair, and Levi was struck again by the remarkable journey that had brought them to this moment. "You saved my life," he murmured, tracing the line of her cheek with his finger. "And you saved mine," she replied, leaning into his touch. "In more ways than one." 3 years later, Levi stood on the porch of their small house on the Diamond G, watching as Emma tended the herbs in her garden. The afternoon sun highlighted the golden strands in her hair, now worn in a practical braid as she worked. The ranch had prospered under Daniel's ownership and Levi's management as foreman. Their own cottage, built not far from the main house, had expanded twice already, once to accommodate Emma's growing medical practice. And again with the arrival of their son, William, now almost 2 years old and currently napping inside. Emma had established herself as the region's most respected healer, her skills sought after throughout the territory. People traveled for days to consult with Doc Emma, as she was affectionately known, bringing ailments that other doctors had failed to treat. Levi's chest swelled with pride as he watched her. She looked up, catching his eye, and smiled the same smile that had captured his heart that day on the trail to paradise. "Are you just going to stand there watching me, Mr. Quincy?" she called, a teasing lilt to her voice. "Thinking about it, Mrs. Quincy," he replied, descending the steps to join her in the garden. "It's a mighty fine view." Emma laughed, the sound as bright and clear as it had been the first time he'd heard it. "Flatterer." Levi wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Not flattery if it's true." She turned in his embrace, her gardening gloves leaving smudges of soil on his shirt as she placed her hands on his chest. "William should be waking soon. And Margaret is bringing little Rose over this afternoon so I can check her cough." "We have time," Levi murmured, brushing a kiss against her temple. "Just wanted to hold you for a moment." Emma studied his face, her green eyes seeing more than he sometimes wished. "What is it? You look pensive." Levi smiled, caught as always by her perceptiveness. "Just thinking about how lucky I am, how close I came to riding past that oak tree without stopping, how different my life would have been." "Our lives," Emma corrected gently. "I was lost too, Levi. Looking for a place where I could be useful, be myself." "And you found it," he said, gesturing to the thriving ranch around them, the garden she'd cultivated, the small but well-equipped infirmary attached to their house. "We found it," she amended, rising on tiptoe to kiss him properly. Together. From inside the house came the sound of their son calling for them, his childish voice still mastering the complexities of language. Emma smiled against Levi's lips before pulling away. "Duty calls, Mr. Quincy." Levi caught her hand as she turned to go, suddenly needing to say the words. "I love you, Emma, more than I ever thought possible." Her smile softened, her eyes reflecting the same depth of feeling. "And I love you, my cowboy, always will." As they walked hand in hand back to the house, to their son and the life they'd built together, Levi reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought them to this point. A bullet, a chance encounter on a dusty trail, and the words that had changed everything. "Then I'll be your healer." Emma had healed more than his wound that day. She'd healed his heart, his soul, given him a home and a purpose when he'd thought such things were beyond his reach. And as he watched her lift their laughing son into her arms, Levi Quincy, once a drifting cowboy with nowhere to belong, knew with absolute certainty that he had found his true north, his anchor in a world that had once seemed so empty. He was home.